University, Professor Macklin Baker. Welcome, Professor Macklin Baker.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Great. So, what do you think about JFK's presidency for a start?
I think it was probably one of the greatest democratic ones. Not to offend any Democrats or Republicans out there. And maybe even the best president in the last 70 years. But that's not a topic for today. Today we're talking about his early life. And, like I said, possibly assassination. We don't really know if it was assassination.
Yeah. Alright. So, what do you think about JFK's illnesses, painkillers, or how he was very short term?
You know, there was this dude on another podcast where he went to JFK's medical place where he had his files locked up. No one ever was able to access it ever. But he asked for permission from a committee of 3 people, and they actually let him in.
Interesting.
But one of them was I don't know if it's a good idea, but he later regretted it. And what they found was he had Addison's disease at a very young age.
Oh.
And that is a horrible disease. It affected him throughout his entire life.
Interesting. Well, what do you think about JFK's early sense of morality after the many deaths of his early siblings?
It changed his life on a view. He begun his thought process of we are only mortal. I can't remember if that's the exact saying, but he had a saying with we are mortal or something like that.
Right.
Something along those lines.
Do you think his religion of Catholicism affected his presidency?
Yes. He grew up during a time where it was really anti-Catholicism in the U.S., especially in the Northeast, which is where he lived, like Boston, all stuff like that. He was probably really hated amongst his community, which is probably why he moved around a lot, which he did move out throughout all of his life.
All right. Do you think it was a good idea at the time for him to advocate and work with Martin Luther King Jr. in the civil rights movement at the time?
I think for him, it's probably a good idea because, the people. But it probably would have ruined his presidency because of most people didn't want that, so it would bring down his popular vote, which of course doesn't really necessarily matter because electoral vote still outweighs popular vote.
All right. What do you think about his early life with his parents and his older brothers being very competitive and having a winning at all cost mindset?
I think this caused him to not necessarily be how he is today, but it definitely shaped his mind differently from his others because he wanted to strive to not be like them, to be his own path, to pave his own path. And he did that, but his brother was actually not necessarily groomed, but he was kind of forced into office, which caused him to oh, I don't want to be politics. Like I said, he didn't want to be in that pathway, and he eventually joined the Navy. His brother also joined the Air Force, and later his brother died. Joe Jr., my bad, by the way. But Joe got shot down. His plane exploded. Never could find his body. Sad. Rest in peace, Joe Jr. But after that death, he strived to come to politics because he wanted to make his father proud, which he never really was proud of his son.
Do you think JFK's path was set up from the beginning, as he is described as very thoughtful and do you think he could have went down as a philosopher?
No. End of story. No.
No?
No.
How do you think it shaped him as a kid to be constantly compared to others by his father? And he was also compared to Joe Jr. very often.
It set his mindset to thinking, oh, I'm not better than these people. Because I'm being compared so often. I always be compared to people, which is a horrible mindset. But I think that eventually got off his mind when he went to politics, because he was great at politics. So he's probably thinking, oh, I'm better than no one else.
After his brother's tragic death, what do you think truly made him go into politics?
The strive to please his father. Since, like I said, like we said, I guess, he was compared really often to his siblings, and I guess it would strive him into thinking, oh, I want to be just like him.
Do you think becoming a lawmaker and congressman helped him get towards his presidency?
Yes, it gave him the insight of the American people, what they want, which would give him also a better oversight of of how to run his campaign and how he did it, which was successful because he got into presidency.
Do you think him being a very known procrastinator ever affected his presidency at any point?
Yes, I think the Civil Rights Movement or Civil Acts Right of 1964. I think he was gonna sign it in 1963, but of course he died November 22nd, 1963. So he wasn't able to continue the act, which LBJ eventually finished it. Which I can't remember exactly what that act did. I think it was to stop segregation, or it was to give them rights.
His short-term decision-making was very problematic in his presidency. Do you think it was problematic, or do you think that led to better decisions that in the Cold War?
I think I'm kind of in the middle of that. Because I think for the Cuban Missile Crisis, that was probably good.
What do you think about the Bay of Pigs invasion?
Very, very unsuccessful. If you don't know what it is, it's basically where JFK and the CIA assembled a team of outcasts or exiled Cubans to go invade Cuba, obviously, which is communist at the time. And that failed because the U.S. never sent air support because we didn't want them to know it was from the U.S. because, of course, would start more tension. And because I can't remember if it was before the Cuban Missile Crisis, but those two stacked on top of each other was horrible for that.
Do you think it was JFK's fault?
That it failed?
Yes.
Yes, I think it was. He didn't send an air support or really any support, and these failed.
Do you think this ties into his very known short-term decision-making being very impulsive?
Like I said, I think yes.
Do you think that we should have... Do you think we should have done Bay of Pigs if it was more planned out and better strategized, or do you think we should have stayed out of Cuba completely?
I think we should have stayed at Cuba completely because if it was successful, it of course would probably start World War III because because like I said, Cuban Missile Crisis, CMC had they had nukes there, so it was a whole shebang. If we went there with more support and they figured out it was the U.S.
Do you think if we won Bay of Pigs, it could have started a nuclear war?
I said this, but yes, I do. 100%.
What do you think the Soviets' reaction to Bay of Pigs would have been?
Oh no, those filthy capitalists trying to take our Cuba. And they probably would start war.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Baker, for coming on to the podcast. It was nice having you.
You too.
And tune in next time for the next episode of Outdoor Podcast.